All right, everybody, it's Mr. Slapguy. I am here today to talk to you about some of the answers that you got for your checkpoint review for 1.4, just in case anybody's confused about the process that I use to solve any of these problems. So we're going to go through a couple of them right now. All right, so let's start off with problem number one right here. Problem number one's direction says solve each absolute value equation, and it says if possible. So we're going to try to solve these ones if we possibly can. So I'm looking at this, and I notice I have absolute values, and I also have a variable term over here that has no absolute values. The split is going to go very much the same as it always does. So we'll have our 2c plus 8, and then we'll have our 10c, and that'll be the same. And then we'll have another 2c plus 8, and another 10c without any change. The big move here is that once again, we're going to use our negatives. So we'll put a negative on there so you can make sure you've got your two different answers. We're going to move our C terms together. So I'm going to subtract 2C over here and subtract 2C over here. That's going to give us 8 is equal to 8C. Then I'm going to do some division. And when I do my division right here, I'm going to get my first value, which is going to be 1. All right, my second value is going to come from this guy right here, and I'm going to use the distributive property on it. That's going to be negative 2C and negative 8, and it's still going to be equal to 10C, like so. Now I need to move my C terms together, and this time I'm going to move my 2C to the right, and I'm going to add it. Negative 8 is equal to 12C this time. Okay, so when I divide this time, I'm going to divide by 12 and divide by 12, and that's going to give me a C value of negative 8 over 12, but negative 8 over 12 can be reduced, so we're going to reduce that down by using a common factor of 4. 4 times 2 is going to be 8. Oops. And 4 times 3 is going to be 12. So there's your second answer right there. So our two answers are C is equal to 1 and negative 2/3. There's your two values that you get right there. So now one of these is not very good. So when we take our negative 2/3 and we plug it back in, negative 2/3 goes here and negative 2/3 goes here. When you do your first one, negative 2/3 times 2 is going to be negative 4/3, and negative 4/3 plus 8 is negative 4 divided by 3. Oops. This 8 is going to give us 20/3. Okay. And on the other side, we are going to get negative 20/3. And so the positive 20/3 and the negative 20/3 don't match very well. And so this answer is actually not going to survive. And we're only going to get one answer available to us, which is going to be our first one that we had, which is 1. All right, next one. So for our next one, what we have is we have double absolute values, and we're going to do the same type of thing. We're going to split this guy, and I'm going to take all of my absolute values and I'm going to rewrite them as parentheses or grouping symbols. So I have round parentheses around my 4w minus 1, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to have round parentheses around my 4w plus 2. There you go. And I'm going to do another round of that exactly the same way. So there's my 4w minus 1. And we're going to have it equal to 3, and then our 4w plus 2. There you go. Okay, distributive property time. So I'm going to use the distributive property here, and I'm going to distribute my 2. That's going to give me 8w minus 2. I'm going to distribute my 3, which is going to give me 12w plus 6. I also get to use the distributive property over here as well. But remember that for one of these, it gets to be negative. Now you get to choose. You can put it over here with the 2 or over with the 3, whatever makes you happy. I'm going to choose to put it on the 2 just because that's how I feel right now. And so that's going to give me negative 8w plus 2. And I'm going to also get my 12w and my 6. Okay, so they're similar, but not quite the same. And so we're going to keep on working on them to get our two different answers. So I want to get my W terms together. So I'm going to subtract 8W over here and subtract 8W over here. That's going to give me negative 2 is equal to 4W plus 6. I'm going to move my 6W over by subtracting that. And that's going to give me negative 8 is equal to 4W. And then lastly, I am going to divide by 4. And that's going to give me a W value of negative 2. Go. Second one. So for our second one right here, we are going to move our 8W over with our 12W, but this time we're going to add 8W to both sides. That's going to give us 2 is equal to 20W. And then I want to move my 6 over. So I'm going to subtract 6 this time. Subtract 6 over here. This is the same step that I had done right next to it. So it's not going to change at all. But this time I'm subtracting it from the 2 instead of a negative 2. And then for my last step right here, I'm going to divide by 20. 4 divided by 20 is not so great. It would have been a lot better if it was 20 divided by 4, but that's not how the cookie crumbles. So we're going to have to take our fraction. So right now, W is equal to negative 4 over 20, but that can be reduced. So we're going to do that. And this time it's going to reduce down to negative 1 over 5. Okay, so now this time when you check it, it works out much better. Your negative number right here, or your negative fraction, I should say, is going to go into a set of absolute values over here and another set of absolute values over here. So everything turns out positive, which is great. That was not the case in the last problem. One of them took on the negative number and made it positive, and the other one took on the negative number and left it negative, which is why this solution over here failed, and this one's going to work out just fine. Okay, number 2. So number 2 right here says, consider the equation x plus 5 is equal to 8. And so we're going to see if we can solve that. So I'm going to start by splitting it. So I'm going to create my x plus 5 is equal to 8 without any absolute values. And I'm going to make another one as well. And the big difference between these is, once again, one of them is going to be negative. So I'm going to put my negative in there. All right, let's do some subtracting. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And that's going to give me my first x value, which is going to be 3. That's the solution that I need. Okay, for our second one right here, we're going to use the distributive property. So I'm going to distribute this guy to both of those terms, which is going to be negative x and negative 5, and it's going to be equal to 8. I'm going to add 5 to both sides, and that's going to give me negative x is equal to 13. And then I need to get rid of that negative sign right there. So I'm going to divide, and I divide by negative 1. There's a couple of different ways you can do that, but I'm just going to choose to do this one. And that's going to be my second x value, which is x is equal to negative 13. There you go. Okay, so how do you do this on a number line? So for a number 9, it's very simple and easy. You just got to do a little bit of counting and a little bit of jumping. So we're going to start off inside of our absolute values. Inside of our absolute values, what we had is x plus 5. And so 5 is going to be the first number I'm going to start with. Now, here's the big kind of caveat, and hopefully something you've noticed over the last 5 or 6 times that we've done these problems, is that the number that you use inside of your absolute values gets a sign change. And so even though it says positive 5, the number that I'm going to be looking for is negative 5. So I'm going to be looking for this guy right here. This is going to be my starting spot right here. Okay, so then what about the number on the outside? If you take a look at the number on the outside, it's 8. And here's the deal. You're going to jump 8 times from your starting spot, but you need to make sure you do it in 2 directions. So one time we're going to jump to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not very surprising to me, but maybe surprising to you, is that what we're going to do is we're going to end up at 3. And that's actually one of the answers that we just came up with right over here. So they match up perfectly, and that's how it's supposed to go. That was 8 jumps. Okay, so now don't forget, you should get a second answer, and you need to jump in the opposite direction as well. So we're going to jump to the left this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And once again, you're going to end up at a very unsurprising number. The number we end up with is negative 13, and that matches exactly with this negative 13 that you had right here. They are identical. The most important part of this guy is that you are finding 2 solutions. You're looking for a solution on the left and another one on the right. That is the biggest, most important step right there. You got to make sure you have both. Okay, let's take a look at our next one right here. So now down here, what we have is we have a couple of problems, and what you get to do is you actually get to work them backwards. So what I gave you is the solutions, and what you need to do is you need to see if you can come up with some equations that will produce the exact same solutions that I provided for you. So that's kind of cool. So the first one is interesting because it has 2 solutions. The second one has only 1 solution, and then the last one clearly has no solutions at all. So I want you to make sure that you can understand that. So in general, here's the kind of deal that I'm looking for. If you're looking for 2 solutions, the main idea here is that you need to start off with your absolute values that are going to have a variable in there, and they need to be equal to some kind of positive number. That's how you create 2 solutions. When you have 1 solution, that is usually going to come up when you have absolute value, and it's going to have a variable in it, and it's going to be equal to 0. That is the situation that you have 1 solution, because 0 is neither positive nor negative, so there's not that wiggle room like you have before. For a negative solution, you're going to have your absolute value with your variable in there, and it needs to be equal to a negative number. So these are the steps that we're going to go through. Okay, so now the first one right here is the most common one when you have 2 solutions, and it's going to go a lot like the last problem. And in fact, if you wanted, you could use the number line from the last problem. Instead of having negative 13 and negative 3 as your solutions, what we're going to do is we're going to have negative 10 and negative 5 as your solutions. So negative 10 is actually right here. So you could set up your spot right here, and -5 is right here. And so you could set up your spot right here. Okay, so now these two spots are like our highlighted spots that we have right over here. Now, something I want you to notice is that the number of jumps is going to take you to the exact middle, halfway between your two solutions. So if we want to find out the spot right here in the middle, we would just need to go from -10 down to -5 and split it perfectly down the middle. And that's going to be right here, right between the -7 and the -8. That's going to be at -7.5. Okay, so that's actually going to be the number with the sign change that goes inside. Instead of -7.5, I'm actually going to make it +7.5. There you go. All right, now what about the other number? Over here in the back, the positive number that we're looking for, that's your number of jumps. Last time we had done 8 jumps to the right and 8 jumps to the left. We don't have to do as many jumps to get from -7.5 to -5 or to get from -7.5 to -10. In fact, we only need a couple of them. We need about a little half of a jump to get from -7.5 to 8, and then we need one full jump to get from 8 to 9, and then another full jump to get from 9 to 10. Same thing over here, a half a jump to get from -7.5 to -7. One full jump to get from -7 to -6, and then another full jump to get from -6 to -5. So about 2.5 jumps. That's the thing that you need right there. So 2.5 is going to be our number that we got there. Okay, so now that's the simplest, easiest way to get that equation right there. I don't have a whole bunch of fancy numbers on there to make it all muddled up, but there are a bunch of other answers that are really good. And so if you don't have this exact same one, that's totally fine. I just wanted to take the opportunity to relate this back to what we had just done in the last problem, because I thought that that would kind of solidify things for you. Okay, so for our next one right here, once again, I'm going to try to pick my simplest way. I already know that I need my variable. I know that I need the number 0 in there, and I need 21 to show up. And so about the only way to make a 21 with a 0 is if you use the number 21 in the problem. So I'm going to choose to use 21 in here. All right, so if I do choose to use 21, you got to make sure that it is going to play well with the 0. So you're adding the 21 over here, but you got to think about bringing it over here with the 0. So just like we were talking about last time, there's going to be a sign change. So I'm going to write this as -21. And then for my last one, for no solution at all, this one's our most simple one. You don't really need any numbers in here with the x, although you're welcome to write as many or as few as you would like. And over here on the other side, you just need a negative number, and it can literally be any negative number you want. So pick whatever negative number makes you happy. My lucky number is 22, so I'm going to choose -22. Okay, let's test them out and see if they work the way that they're supposed to. So for my first one right here, I'm going to split it and see if I can solve both of these. So that's going to be x plus 7.5 is equal to 2.5. And then I'm going to do another x plus 7.5 is equal to 2.5. And I want to see if I can make that second one negative. Okay, so now on my first move right here, I'm going to subtract 7.5 from both sides. So 2.5, take away 7.5, that is going to give me -5. Excellent. That's one of the answers I was looking for, so I feel good about that. Let's do another one. So now we're going to use the distributive property with our negative. Now that's now -x minus 7.5 equals 2.5. I want to move my 7.5 over. This time I'm going to add it. This is the real important piece right here in order to make your values big enough. So now 7.5 and 2.5, 7, 8, 9, and then our 0.5s are going to combine together to give us our 10. Now 10 is pretty good, but we really want it to be -10. Luckily, our x is already negative, so it's kind of holding on to the sign for us. We're going to divide by -1 on both sides, and we're going to get an x value of -10. So that one worked as well. Excellent. Let's move on to our second one. So our second one right here is going to be x minus 21 is equal to 0. You can split that one if you would like. That's just going to be x minus 21 equals 0 and -x minus 21 equals 0. There you go. For my first one, I'm going to add 21 to both sides. And not surprisingly, I get x is equal to 21. Like I said, 0s and 21s are about the only way you can make it work. And then for our other one right over here, we've got that negative sign. So we're going to move the negatives over. That's going to give us -x and positive 21. Now, when you start off, you're going to be subtracting the 21 over. And that's going to give us -x is equal to -21. But then, just like last time, you have to divide by -1. And all of a sudden, that -21 becomes a positive 21. And you get the exact same answer twice. Now, also, just like last time, this is a very easy and simple way to get my answer. I tried to keep it as basic as possible, but there are a ton of other ways to get this to work the exact same way you want it to. So if you didn't come up with this exact equation, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. You just need to make sure that it checks out the way that mine check out. So that works out well. Last one, I really don't need to do very much work at all right here. It's an absolute value. It's equal to negative. That's impossible. There's no solution. Let's flip over to the backside. So on the backside, we've got a couple more examples that I wanted to show you so we can get to a full understanding. So for the next one right here, it says choose a value for C. So there is a variable X right here, but we don't want to solve for X right now. That's not important. What we want to do is we want to focus on C. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to replace that with a number so that this equation has no solution. Now we were just talking about no solution. And the big thing about that right there is that it's going to be equal to a negative. So we're going to be trying to create a negative. Also similar to the last one, there's a whole bunch of great answers to this one. You don't have to do the exact same one that I'm going to do. Okay, so now the most basic gut reaction would be to just put a negative number right here. And so let's take a look at what would happen if we did that. So if you take a negative number and you put it there, hold on one second. Like if we pick negative 10, negative 3, 2x plus 5, negative 7 equals negative 10. There's your value right there. That's a negative number for sure. One of the things that I want you to remind you about is that you do have these numbers that are in front of and behind the absolute values, and they actually need to move over before you make any determinations as to whether the problem has a solution or not. So I do need to make a couple of moves, and I'm going to do that now. So I'm starting by adding 7 to both sides. And if I add 7 to both sides, it is definitely going to make it a little bit more positive, but not positive enough. And then if we take our negative 3, though, this is where the change happens. So now if we divide by negative 3 and we divide by negative 3 over there, all of a sudden, now what you have is you have an absolute value with your 2x plus 5, although that's not very important. And it is equal to positive 1. Okay, so now that will have solutions. In fact, it'll have 2 solutions. And so that's not exactly the one that we want. So we are on the right track. We're trying to get negative numbers, but that's not the right negative number. So you're going to need to pick something on the other side of negative 10. Maybe try something a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. And in fact, this time something a little bit smaller or a little closer to 0 is going to be a better choice. So if I pick something like negative 2, that would be a little bit better. Let me show you that one. So we're going to create the exact same equation again. So we're going to have our negative 3 and our absolute value of 2x plus 5. Notice I'm not really doing anything with my 2x plus 5. That's inside the absolute value. It's not very important at this point. And then I'm going to choose a C value of negative 2. When I'm working with this one, I'm going to go through the exact same steps. I have numbers that are in front of and behind the absolute values, and they all need to move over with the negative 2. So I'm going to add the 7 to both sides. Now, this is where things get a little bit surprising. You're going to add 7 and your value is going to change. So our negative 3 and our 2x plus 5 are still over here. And then all of a sudden, 7 and negative 2 is going to give us a value of positive 5. Now, that doesn't seem very good, but then you're going to divide by negative 3. And all of a sudden, positive 5 is going to get divided by negative 3. And now you have an absolute value, 2x plus 5, and it's going to be equal to a negative number. It's a nasty fraction, but that's not important. The most important thing is that it is negative. And so that number is going to be much better. So what's a good value for C? A good value for C would be something like negative 2. Some other good values for C would be something like negative 3, or even bigger than that, you could do something like 0 or 1 or 2. All of those would be good. Basically, anything that's bigger than negative 7 is going to be a good value. So there are plenty of options available to you. You can pick whichever one you'd like. Last forward right down here, it says solve each equation, and it does say to check your solutions. So we're going to see if we can go through these. You can definitely, or hope that you can tell that there are some easy ones and that there are some medium ones, and then there are some hard ones as well. So we're going to be looking out for some of those different situations. Starting off with this very easy one, we've only got positive numbers. There's nothing in front of or behind the absolute value, so this should go pretty smooth for you. I'm going to start with my split, which is going to be m plus 8 is equal to 12, and another m plus 8 is equal to 12. I need to make sure I include my negatives so that I got 2 different answers, not the same answer twice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract my 8 from both sides. And that's going to give me m is equal to 4. There's your first value right there. Okay, for our second one, we're going to start with our distributive property. That's going to be negative m and negative 8. And it's still going to be equal to 12. Now I'm going to move my 8 over, and I'm going to divide by negative 1. I'm going to start by moving my 8 over using addition this time. And then I'm going to divide by negative 1. This is very similar to another problem that we've already done. And this is going to give me negative 20 this time. All right, if you're concerned about your answer being negative right here, you check it if you would like, and that would work out just fine. So if we do take our -20 and we plug it back in here, that would be -20 plus 8, which is going to be -12. But then the absolute value of -12 turns out to be +12, so this answer is definitely going to work. Same kind of thing with our 4. Our 4 would go in here. 4 plus 8 would be +12, and the absolute value would keep it positive, and so that one would also work just fine. So that one's a very, very nice, straightforward one. Hopefully you feel very comfortable with that one. Let's do the one right next to it. Slightly different. You have 2 absolute values, but that, once again, that doesn't mean that it's twice as much work. It just means that you have options available to you. So I'm going to do my split right off the bat. That's going to be 4x plus 5 and 3x minus 2. There we go. Let's look a little nicer. There we go. And I'm going to do another one. There you go. All right. And then once again, the negative. Now, because there are 2 absolute values, that means you have 2 different spots that you can put the negative, but only one of them is going to go. So you can use it in the front or you can use it in the back, whatever makes you feel happy. I'm going to choose to put the one in the front. Please don't put it on both. All right. So now when I'm solving, I'm going to move my 3K over with my 4K. And that's going to bring me down to just K plus 5 specifically. Then I'm going to move my 5 over to the other side by subtracting 5 from both sides. And when I subtract 5, that's going to give me a K value of -7. There you go. All right, next one. So for our next one right here, we're going to use our distributive property right off the bat. That's going to give us -4K and -5. And then we still have our 3K and our -2. All right, so once again, let's move our 4K over. So I'm going to add 4K to both sides. I always like to go after my K terms first, or any variable first. It's a personal choice. You don't have to do it the same way, but that's what I like. There you go. Now I have a much larger K term. I have 7K instead. And now I'm going to move my 2 over so my K can be by itself. -5 and 2 is going to take me down to -3. And then, like we've seen a couple of times, when you divide right here, it's going to be nasty. 3 divided by 7 is not very great. So we're just going to leave it as K is equal to -3/7. There's your best answer right there. Now, in our first problem, we had 1 positive solution and 1 negative solution, and they're great. In our second problem, we have 1 negative solution and another negative solution, and they're great too. It is a toss-up whether your answers are positive or negative. That's not particularly important. All right, next one. This one right here is a little bit more of a challenging one, especially because it's so subtle. The thing that I want you to make sure you're watching out for is that you have a variable right here that is outside the absolute values, and that can be detrimental. So when I do my split, which is going to happen right off the bat, everything should feel very normal. We're going to have our 5y plus 2 is equal to 7y. We're going to do it all over again. And we're going to make sure we include our negative. Let's do some solving. I'm going to move my 5y over with my 7y. And I'm going to divide. Hopefully that looks like a really nice answer to you. For our second one right here, what's going to happen is we're going to distribute this guy, and that's going to give us -5y and -2. Don't distribute to the 7. It's on the other side of the equal sign. I'm going to move my 5y over again by adding it this time. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to divide. And when I divide right here, we're going to get another fraction, and that's not really that big of a deal, but we just need to make sure we reduce it a little bit. 2 and 12 have a common factor of 2, so that's going to give us a reduced fraction of -1/6. Okay, so now both of those feel very much the same as the situation that we just got done working on. We had one nice answer and one not so nice answer. We've got some positive answers, we've got some negative answers, we've got some positive answers, we've got some negative answers. So this should feel very normal. But unfortunately, in this case, one of these answers is not going to work. Specifically, it's the second one. Right over here, remember how I was talking about how the y was outside? What you're going to end up doing here is you're going to do 7 times a -1/6. Now, it doesn't really matter that it's a fraction. What it really matters is that it's negative. This is going to turn into a negative product right here. And then you have an absolute value that is equal to a negative number, and that's impossible. So that is going to be a no solution output right there. This one works great. There's nothing wrong with the one. It'll produce really good answers for you, and it'll check out just fine. But it is that -1/6 that does not work. So sometimes there's no solution at all, as we've seen a couple of times. Sometimes there's one solution and sometimes there's 2. Last one right here is going to be this guy. And this one's tricky because there are so many numbers floating around and the way that they interact with each other. So we have this 3 right here in front of the absolute values, and we have a 6 right behind it. We need to see if we can deal with them first before we do any splitting. So I'm going to move the 6 over first, and I want you to notice what we get when we do this. That is going to give us 3 absolute value of 5x minus 10. And then we're going to end up with a 0 on the right side because 6 take away 6 is 0. Cool. That's a little bit of a unique number. 0 is interesting because it isn't positive and it isn't negative. It is the absence of sign. And that kind of puts it at a weird spot as far as absolute values go, because absolute value is really obsessed with sign. And so this is a strange number to be working with an absolute value problem. You can still split it and you can still solve. So we're going to have our 5x minus 10 is equal to 0. And we're going to have another 5x minus 10 is equal to 0. But we're going to put a negative on this one. And we can do some solving. I'm going to move my 10 over by adding it to both sides. And then I'm going to divide by 5. And that's going to give me an x value of 2. That goes very smooth. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's take a look at what happens with the second one. So now I'm going to end up with negative 5x plus 10 this time equals 0. And I'm going to move my 10 over by subtracting it this time. Slightly different than what we did last time. So now I have negative 5x is equal to negative 10, and I'm going to divide. And when I divide, I'm going to divide by that negative 5. Negative divided by negative is going to be positive, and we're going to end up with an x value of 2. That is the exact same x value that we had before. It's a repeat customer. That's okay as well. It just turns out that there's one solution, and that solution is 2. Okay, there you go. That is every single problem from your review packet, and hopefully that helps you prepare a little bit before you take your checkpoint. We're going to continue to review and work on more materials, and then we'll take our checkpoint in the second half of the hour.